Hi, it's just 2 p.m. and I'm going to briefly open this hearing session. We've got some technical issues, so I will resume in 5 minutes. In other words, at 2:05. So we're closing up for the minute. Thank you. It's 2 minutes, 5 minutes past 2, so they're resuming matter 11 relating to the examination of the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea's local plan. If you don't know me, my name's Louise Nurse and I'm the planning inspector who's been appointed to examine this plan. We have Mr. Batty, who is involved in this session remotely. Can I just confirm that you can hear everything? We can hear you?
Yes.
Great, thank you. All right, so we're going to now look at the final question, which was 172. Does the plan have clear and effective mechanisms for the implementation, delivery and monitoring? Obviously, the council has said yes. So the question is, in terms of your table 4, for monitoring, to my mind, is it clear which policies these monitoring, these indicators actually relate to?
I think we can add the reference to policy references to the table. I think that would definitely be very helpful.
Because clearly all of the policies should be covered by the indicators. And in terms of the trigger for review mechanism, when would you actually result in a review of the policy? It doesn't seem to be clear to me, because you've got a number of developments of threat. For example, Green Blue Future. Is Green Blue Future something is that a chapter title, or where does that come from?
It's green. It's green. Brilliant chapter. I believe green.
It's chapter 2, and it's not corresponding with the name in the table, so we change.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really required is for you to consider how it relates to the structure of the plan, so we can then work out how it actually is clear how it will be monitored. But so, for example, the first one on your list, number of developments of thresholds set up in policy, achieving on-site carbon reduction targets. Sorry, I don't actually understand what that means, to be honest. But then you say your trigger is any relevant permission.
And not complying with the requirement.
Yeah, so every time something doesn't come forward that doesn't hit the policy, what are you going to do? Are you going to review the policy?
I think you're right. It's not very clear. I think. Well, first of all, the indicator is about policy GB4, which the trigger point is major developments requiring, if we're allowed to have the space heating targets, etc., that will forward as a modification of the Part L requirements. So it would be where I think we'll have to put kind of, proportion, and it has to be quite a high bar in terms of it would have to be the majority of our permissions not being able to comply with the requirements, which may then mean that the policy has been set to be undeliverable. So that may trigger a review, or if everyone is overachieving the target, then that may be another reason for us to maybe tighten the policy.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have been referred to the Southwark local plan. I haven't actually looked at it, to be honest, but somebody said that was best practice in terms of how the review mechanism takes place. But in terms of, as it stands, it's not very clear how you would actually use these indicators and what they actually relate to, because obviously you need to know what policy you're going to review to be able to, hence you need to have the reference to the indicator. So does anybody else wish to raise anything relating to the monitoring? Mr. Batty, did you want to come in?
Yeah, to be honest, I found the whole prospects of monitoring all of this quite comprehensively unattainable. We've gone through most of the papers that have been discussed, the policies, and of course the plan. And we found most of it very difficult to ascertain from a layman's point of view, what is the target, what is being hit, and how we know how we can check that targets are being hit along the way. In particular, the new local plan in of itself being obviously a very large document, and I understand the complexity and the many moving parts, but we do find it very difficult to put our finger on how targets are being met. For example, how targets are being met for climate change, how targets are being met for carbon emissions in particular, and how the community, as a community member, how we can see how the council is doing to attain the targets that they're committed to, and most crucially, how this is going to be done independently, because a lot of it relies upon the council marking its own homework. So I understand it's a very difficult process. I understand there are many working parts, but as a member of the community, or as community members, how can we see how CB2, the circular economy, for example, is being achieved? How can we see CB1 1 to 4, how those overall measurements are being achieved, if not in real time, in approximate real time, so that we know that we can hold the council to account insofar as how we can, as a community, put pressure on the council to take remedial action. How do we know how many houses are being taken out of public ownership by right to buy, and how many of those are being replaced? How do we know how social housing is being? So you understand that I'm giving you a whole host of stuff.
Yeah, I understand. I think the council, I'm hoping the council will respond by saying that they're going to do an annual monitoring report. Yeah, but I'll leave that to them to say. But clearly, the indicate, as I've intimated, the indicators are very. The indicators could be made considerably more clear. In terms of the issue about it being independent, the council will be the people that hold the data, and much of it will be relating to, for example, in terms of the climate change issues, in terms of them having these, they will have a 106 or whatever will set out various things that are required, and the council will need to monitor that to ensure that that's been undertaken. So the council will have to find proxies for ensuring that it is clear. But I'll leave them to respond directly to your point.
I think we publish an annual monitoring report. It's normally done at the end of the year. So the last one was published in December last year, December 2022, and then there will be another one again at the end of the year. So the purpose of the monitoring report is to include information against all the indicators that were agreed for the current local plans going forward. That approach will continue. I think specifically with regards to the circular economy policy, there is a requirement, as you know, that we require applicants to submit circular economy statements, and includes post-construction monitoring. So it's done for each case, and there's a whole list of requirements that they must submit to demonstrate to us that what they had envisaged during the construction and operational phase of that development has actually been achieved post-construction, and that information is submitted to us, but as well as to the GLA. So they record this for the whole of London, and it's available on the London Planning London Data Hub. So the GLA monitor that information for the raft of policies, including for life cycle carbon as well as the circular economy. And that, as Madam Inspector pointed out, we secure that by Section 106 agreements generally, and that includes the monitoring information.
Very much. Does anybody else wish to raise anything related to implementation and monitoring?
Probably just add to what Ms. Galatis just said. Normally, the authority monitoring report is also subject to scrutiny by the Environment Select Committee. We normally have to prepare a report giving a breakdown of the different policies so that it can be scrutinised. And clearly the reports are available on our website, so they are publicly accessible. So there is a degree of scrutiny, and obviously as officers we look at the success of policies because we want to make sure that they are actually effective and deliverable. So we will be monitoring that as well, and also looking at issues such as an appeal decisions coming through and how successful the policies have been. So there is active monitoring that goes on.
Thank you very much. Okay, unless anyone has anything else that we should raise relating to this vote. Ms. Frame, you've forgotten your phone and it's right at the end as well.
I'm sorry, I took them on.
Oh, Ms. Frame, yeah.
She took them all away. I'm a little confused about SPDs and the fact that we have quite a few SPDs that actually even what the tree SPD was referred to as being worked on 2 years ago. And the reference that the plan now supersedes SPD. So I'm confused because we have quite a few SPDs that actually, the greening one particularly, trees that are up to date. We have quite a few that are quite old that need to be done.
Okay, the council will probably answer this question, but it's not really to do with the implementation and monitoring. But it is fundamentally an SPD once it's has to relate to a policy, and if the policy is still in the local plan, it probably would have significant weight. It may be best practice just to refresh it, but I'll ask the council to speak with you after the hearing session if you don't mind about that. That would make my time quicker. Mr. Batty, you put your hand up.
Yeah, I wondered whether the council would countenance or at least agree to look at having citizen scrutineers, specifically on fire safety, but also on environmental issues, just as a, if you like, as a nod to the community having deep concerns about those specific areas. It's obviously, it's not something we've talked about before. I do understand that this is about monitoring, but that those scrutineers could take part in it at an early stage.
Well, I mean, all I'm talking about is sorry, I can't really talk about that. If you wish to have that kind of conversation with the council, please do. But in terms of the implementation and monitoring, I'm really looking at this section in terms of whether the plans, policies are being monitored, by ensuring that they're being effectively monitored and implemented. Yeah, that's where I'm. Okay, as far as I can see, the council is committed to going off and rejigging that table. Am I correct, Mr. Wade?
Yes.
Great. So I'm going to formally close this. Mr. Batty, I was going to close the hearing session.
One quick indulgence. Can the any feedback and reports be done in crystal English, in easy English, so the community can understand what is being said and what is being heard?
That may be something that you wanted to raise at the next stage. I'm just closing this implementation and monitoring element of the hearing session. So that's officially closed, and then we're going to move on to what happens next. Okay, so first of all, I'd just like to thank everybody for their good humour and how they've all participated in this examination session, including council clearly. There are IT people, participants, including members of the community. And of course, I'd very much like to thank Helen, who's been very helpful for everyone, I'm sure. And she's certainly been very supportive for me. What's going to happen now is that there's some site visits that I believe, I know at least one site visit I've been asked to undertake, which is the Gypsy and Traveller site, and someone else has intimated that they wish me to undertake a site visit, and we're just getting confirmation whether that's going to happen or not. I'm not asking for anyone else to suggest that I go for a site visit, because as far as I'm concerned, those opportunities are now finished. Sorry, I've been for yeah. Don't expire right at the end.
It's fine.
If you don't mind. Okay, in terms of the action points that the council have put together, still I'm obviously awaiting weeks 2 and 3. Once I have those action points and I'm relatively content with what they've said, they'll go on the website, and obviously I also need the actual work that the action points have referenced. For that, before I have that, I'm unable really to move any further forward. I have to take into consideration all that work, and I have to come to a conclusion as to whether further work's required or whether I'm going to go straight to main modifications. When I go to main modifications, I'll write to the council and set out in very brief terms the main modifications that I consider are required. Then there'd be an element of informal discussion between myself and the council, which will be undertaken by the programme officer, and this is a standard process just to make sure the wording is watertight. Then the main modifications would go out for a formal consultation of a 6-week period. If any changes are required to the integrated impact assessment or the HRA, which is a habitat regulation assessment, the council will be providing that as well. Following the consultation, and bearing in mind the consultation, anyone who makes representation to the consultation it's not a second bite at the original plan, it's whether being changes to the plan. This is what the consultation process relates to. I will then take those into account, and it's very unlikely, but it has been known for further hearing sessions to take place, but this is very unusual. It may result in making further modifications, but as I say, if I were to go for a hearing session afterwards, that would be unusual, but it is possible. I would then write a report which would go to the council. It'll be addressed to the council, and the planning inspectorate hopes to write in clear and plain English. That is our objective. And this report would set out the reasons for these main modifications. I'd just like to signal that not everyone's representation will be referred to. It's purely the question of whether the plan is sound and why I have recommended any main modifications. I think it's important to make that clear. If someone were to read it, for example, they didn't mention this. It's because it's just whether it's a main modification and it's actually required. I will have to set out the soundness in terms of the 4 reasons why a plan can be found not sound. And then the council would adopt a plan. And this is sort of the ideal scenario, but obviously I have to go off and think about various issues that have come out as a result of the plan. Examination. The examination remains open until the council receives the plan report. However, I will not be requesting further information. I mean, if any further information is to come to me, it is purely my request. Mrs. Wilson will remove, or she'll basically send back anything that's sent that isn't actually requested. Does anybody have any questions?
No, just one point. Do we get a fact checking?
Oh, yes, sorry to apologise, yes. And the other issue is that the council will get a fact check of the report before it's formally published. And at the fact check, they are allowed to check that I've got my facts right and to check my punctuation. Nothing else. They can't use it as a way of sort of arguing the toss.
I think I just wanted to say that in terms of the action points for weeks 2 and 3, we will send them to you tomorrow with the kind of outlining the timescales by which work will be done. I'm hoping that it would be by the first week of September, end of August, that we can finish all the actions and all the work that we've been requested to do. And then depending on how, you want to play it, we hope that we can start the consultation on the modifications mid to late September.
I would also counsel the council, if there are obvious main mods that you would like to talk to people outside of the hearing, so it'd be obviously sensible to work with others. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay.
There's one last thing. We have received a letter from the GLA. I can email it to you. We've got hard copies now, but I can email it to you. That's
okay. Thank you. Yeah, if you could send it via the programme officer, it'll become an examination document that relates to housing. I see. Okay. Unless there's anything else to say, I'd like to close this hearing session and thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.